Can people really change, and do you have the power to change them? Well, this man says yes. Author Lamm is here with the tools he says can help you change someone you love. Welcome.
Thanks.
You're speaking
it is a conundrum, isn't
it is a conundrum because I come from the school of thought that you can only change yourself. You can't change other people, and especially their behavior. But you're saying that this comes from a real special, deep place for you. Tell us your backstory.
Sure. Well, if my friends had not stepped in and said, hey, we love you, we're worried about you, and we think you're going to die if you don't get help, and it was a process.
Yeah.
I would be dead.
Well,
so I come from the personal experience of I was not ready. And one of the great myths of intervention and change is that someone has to hit bottom. They have to want help. And I know from personal experience and working with really thousands of people in my practice that a person does not need to raise a white flag and say, hey, I'm done.
All right.
We just have to have them say yes. And then over time they can come to their own decision.
All right, a little backstory on him. He was a weather person in Washington, D.C. Yes,
yeah.
And you were addicted to alcohol and crystal meth.
I know. Who thought? You know, I was a nice boy that grew up in a home with no alcohol, no drugs, and it was I was the black sheep, and I struggled privately with addiction for 20 years.
So how long did it take you until people actually said, you know what, Brad, this is what you need to do, and you actually listened to them?
Well, it took a long time. I was 35 when my friends finally sat me down and said, you know, we are not taking no for an answer, and we love you, and we're worried about you, and we think you're going to die if you don't get help. And that started a process. About 6 months later, I went into rehab.
All right, let's talk about alcohol. You had a problem with it. So how do you know when somebody has a problem with alcohol and when it's not a big enough deal for you to actually intervene?
Sure. I always like to ask this question to families and friends. This is a good litmus test. What is it costing them?
Right.
You know, are they having problems with their job, relationships? Are they having financial problems because their drinking is interfering with them having a full life? So that's a good question to ask as a jumping off point.
All right, so if they do have an addiction, what is the approach that you would do to talk to your loved one?
I say don't go at one-on-one. There is strength in numbers.
Really?
And so you gather the voices that matter. You know, if it's mom and dad, if it's an ex-girlfriend, sometimes it's people like a former teacher or a minister or sometimes an employer. If somebody needs to go off to treatment, that's the test I use for involving the employer. If somebody needs to go away to get help, go to rehab, it's good to include the employer because that's probably going to be their primary reservation. I can't go, I got to go to work.
Right.
You know, and so you get those voices that matter together, and then you present to them this message. You invite them into the process, first of all. It's not like you see on TV. The type of intervention I work is an invitational model. We invite the person in from the beginning, deliver a really loving message. That word no is a conversation starter.
It is a conversation starter, but a lot of people say, no, I don't have a problem, I don't agree with this.
Sure.
And what if they don't agree at all and they're completely in denial?
And sometimes you can get so discouraged that it's easy to walk away. I had a family, I talk about it in the book that I worked with, and we heard no 43 times over 6 hours, and the family was just broken down. They'd already been through so much to hear no so many times. They said, we're done.
Yeah.
And we just kept working because I encourage families to look at this, families and friends, look at a box inside of you, in your heart, and say it can be filled with hope or fear, anger or love. It can't be both. And so I just encourage, I keep bringing folks back to the hope and the love because those are better motivators than any of the other stuff. Fear and anger are easier to tap into, but they are not going to serve you in helping somebody get better and break that addiction.
All right, let's talk about internet obsession. A lot of people have that issue as well. What's the difference between a hobby and a problem? How do you tell the difference? And when can you intervene?
Again, it's a question, what's it costing you?
Yeah.
And even as an employer sometimes, you know, it's a huge problem at the job place. People using the internet for hours while they're supposed to be doing their work. And sometimes we just have a problem even stepping in and asking the question, hey, we're worried about you, we're worried about us.
So come back to that place of hope again.
Yeah, let's talk about change and let's get to change.
What is the most difficult thing that you see when people have issues with, let's say, their weight or alcohol, drugs, internet, for instance? What is stopping them from actually admitting that they have a problem?
I think for the addicted person, the person that's struggling with the behavioral issue, it's the disbelief that they can have lasting and effective change. At the end of my rope, I had absolutely no hope. And I just thought it was impossible for me to make lasting and real change. And so I think it's folks are broken down. They just think that it's not going to work for them.
But behaviorally, you're still going to your job. You're still doing your thing. So you're sort of still motivated in some way, even though you have this great problem.
But use food as the issue, and we do a lot of work with disordered eating. You see a friend or family member get bigger and bigger and bigger, and their health decline, and their breathing is labored, and their life really suffers, and yet it's sort of a sacred cow. We don't want to talk to them about being fat. Because we think, well, if they want to be fat, they can be fat. But really, there are reasons why I'm eating so much. It's not about the food. It's not because I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And so I say with addiction and behavioral issues with people we love, let there be no sacred cows. Let's jump in and be honest and loving and help motivate real and lasting change. By nature, we are changeable creatures.
All right, so bottom line, if you do have somebody that you love out there that has any of these issues, what should you keep in mind?
Be encouraged and make an invitation. Don't ambush. Invite them into the process, and don't do it alone. There is strength in numbers.
I like that, strength in numbers, and don't give up. It takes lots and lots of time and effort and love.
At the end of your rope is hope.